Karen Pemberton adjusted her ring light for the third time, checking her reflection in the laptop screen as neighbors began logging into the monthly Willowbrook HOA meeting. At exactly 7:00 p.m., she unmuted herself and declared, "I'm calling for an emergency vote of no confidence in our current board." Motion seconded by my husband, Richard. The Zoom screen erupted in a chaos of unmuted microphones. "You can't second your own motion," shouted Mrs. Chen from Unit 42. "Richard doesn't even live here anymore. He's temporarily residing elsewhere due to irreconcilable differences," Karen snapped, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against her desk. "But his name is still on the deed, which gives him voting rights." Board President Jim Rodriguez looked exhausted even through the pixelated video feed. "Karen, we've been through this. You can't overthrow the entire board because we denied your request to ban children's chalk drawings on sidewalks. This isn't about chalk." Karen's voice cracked with indignation. "This is about standards, quality of life. When I moved to Willowbrook Estates, I was promised a community of like-minded individuals who understand the importance of property values and aesthetic integrity." She had rehearsed the speech for weeks, ever since the board's last unreasonable decision. The camera caught her at the perfect angle, authoritative, concerned, ready to lead. What it didn't show was the stack of printed emails behind her laptop, evidence of her months-long campaign to document every minor infraction in the neighborhood. "Last month, you people allowed the Hendersons to plant sunflowers, in their front yard without proper committee approval," Karen continued, her voice rising. "The month before that, you ignored my complaint about the Martinez family's wind chimes exceeding the 40 decibel limit clearly stated in Section 12.3 of our community guidelines." Tom Henderson, still in his work uniform, leaned into his camera. "Karen, those sunflowers brought joy to everyone on the street. My daughter planted them for her school project. Joy doesn't maintain property values, Tom." Karen's smile was sharp as a blade. "Neither does your daughter's sidewalk chalk art, which, by the way, violates the community aesthetic standards outlined in—" "Oh, stuff it, Karen." The voice belonged to Margaret Santos, the elderly woman from the corner house who'd lived in Willowbrook longer than anyone. "You've been making everyone's life miserable for 2 years. We're sick of it." The Zoom chat exploded with messages of agreement. Karen watched the virtual hands raising in support, not of her motion, but of Margaret's sentiment. Her carefully planned coup was crumbling before it even began. "I see," Karen said quietly, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "So this is how it's going to be. Well, I hope you're all prepared for the consequences of your choices." She reached for her phone, scrolling to the contact she'd been saving for exactly this moment. The screen showed, "City Code Enforcement, Direct Line. The meeting is adjourned," Jim announced hastily, but Karen was already dialing. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Karen had filed 17 separate code violations with the city, each meticulously documented with photos, timestamps, and reference citations. She'd been awake since 5 a.m., walking the neighborhood with her camera and a measuring tape, finally putting her months of surveillance to use. The first knock came at the Henderson house at 9:15 a.m. Karen watched from her kitchen window as a tired-looking code enforcement officer measured the height of their garden gnomes. The second knock was at the Martinez house, wind chime violation. The third was at Margaret Santos' place. Her bird feeder was apparently 6 inches too close to the property line. Karen's phone buzzed with increasingly frantic text messages from neighbors. She ignored them all except one from Jim Rodriguez. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." They met at the community center that afternoon. Jim looked like he hadn't slept, his usually neat appearance disheveled. "Karen, you've weaponized the city against your own neighbors. Do you understand what you've done?" "I've enforced the standards that you were too weak to maintain," Karen replied, settling into her chair with the satisfaction of someone who held all the cards. "The Hendersons have been issued a $200 fine for unapproved garden decorations. The Martinez family owes $150 for noise violations. Margaret Santos faces $300 in penalties for improper bird feeder placement." "These are good people, Karen. Margaret is 78 years old. She can't afford Age doesn't exempt anyone from community standards. Karen opened her laptop, revealing a spreadsheet that made Jim's eyes widen. I have documentation of 43 violations across 27 properties. If the board won't act, the city will. Jim stared at the screen, scrolling through months of Karen's meticulous record-keeping. Photos of slightly overgrown hedges, garbage cans visible from the street, unauthorized doormats, children's toys left on front lawns for more than the permitted 24-hour period. You've been watching everyone, he said quietly. For months, I've been protecting our investment. Karen's voice carried a tremor of something that might have been hurt. When Richard left, this house became everything to me. This community was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to finally live somewhere that met my standards. Your standards are impossible, Karen. No one can live up to them. The Willowbrook covenants clearly state, forget the covenants for a second. Jim's composure cracked. Listen to yourself. You're destroying lives over bird feeders and garden gnomes. These aren't violations, they're homes. Places where people live and laugh and make memories. Karen's fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard. The emergency board meeting is tomorrow night. I'm calling for a complete restructuring of community enforcement. Either you support it, or I continue working with the city directly. And if we don't, Karen's smile was cold. I have enough documented violations to keep code enforcement busy for months. Every neighbor who voted against me last night will receive a personal visit from the city. Every single one. Jim left without another word, but Karen wasn't finished. She spent the evening crafting her masterpiece, a comprehensive proposal for enhanced community standards enforcement that would essentially give her authority to fine neighbors directly through the HOA, bypassing the need for city involvement. As she typed, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her sister Lisa's name, but Karen let it go to voicemail. She didn't have time for family drama when she was so close to finally having the power to create the perfect community she'd always dreamed of. The emergency meeting had 47 attendees, the highest turnout in Willowbrook HOA history. Karen had prepared meticulously. Her presentation slides loaded with property value statistics, community standard comparisons, and a detailed budget for her proposed enforcement system. Before we begin, Jim announced, his voice heavy with resignation, I want to read something that was sent to every resident this afternoon. Karen frowned. She hadn't sent anything to every resident. It's from Margaret Santos, Jim continued. She wanted everyone to know that she's selling her house and moving in with her daughter. The code enforcement fines and stress have become too much for her to handle at her age. The Zoom screen went silent. Karen felt something cold settle in her stomach. Margaret has lived in Willowbrook for 15 years. Jim continued. She's the woman who organized our annual block parties, who checked on everyone during the ice storm 3 years ago, who baked cookies for every new family that moved in. She's selling her house because she can no longer afford to live in her own neighborhood. Karen unmuted herself quickly. That's unfortunate. But community standards must be maintained for everyone's benefit. Individual hardship doesn't. Stop. The voice belonged to Tom Henderson, but it carried a weight Karen had never heard before. Just stop talking, Karen. We know what you've done. We know about the private investigator you hired to photograph our properties. We know about the fake noise complaints you filed against the Gonzalez family's quinceañera. We know everything. Karen's presentation slides seemed to blur on her screen. I don't know what you're talking about. Lisa called me. Tom continued. Your sister was worried about you. She told me about Richard leaving, about you losing your job, about how you've been spiraling since your mother died. She'd asked me to look out for you, to try to understand what was happening. The blood drained from Karen's face. Lisa had betrayed her. Her own sister had shared her private business with these people. This isn't about community standards. Margaret Santos' voice came through clearly despite her age. This is about a hurt woman trying to control everyone else because she can't control her own life. That's not true. Karen's voice cracked. I'm trying to protect our property values. I'm trying to maintain the community we all agreed to when we moved here. No, Karen, Jim said gently. You're trying to punish everyone else for your pain, and we can't let you do that anymore. The vote was called without Karen's presentation. Motion to remove Karen Pemberton, from all HOA committees and bar her from future board positions. Motion to reverse all city code violations filed in the past 60 days through personal mediation. Motion to establish a community support fund to help neighbors affected by unnecessary fines. Karen watched the virtual hands raise against her: 41 in favor, 5 abstentions, 1 opposed. She was the one opposed vote. The motions pass, Jim announced. Karen, you're welcome to remain a resident of Willowbrook, but your involvement in HOA governance is terminated. Karen's finger hovered over the Leave Meeting button, but she didn't click it. Instead, she sat in the silence, watching her neighbors' faces on the screen. Some looked angry, others relieved, but a few, including Tom Henderson, looked sad. I was just trying to make things better, she whispered, not sure if her microphone was even on. We know, Margaret Santos said softly, but your idea of better was everyone else's idea of miserable. After the meeting ended, Karen sat alone in her empty house, the silence broken only by the sound of her phone buzzing with text messages she wouldn't read. Outside her window, she could see the Henderson sunflowers swaying in the evening breeze, and for the first time in months, she wondered if they might actually be beautiful. But as she sat there, a new email notification appeared on her laptop screen. The sender was listed as Willowbrook Estates Property Management Company. The subject line read, "Regarding your recent HOA activities, legal consultation required." Karen's hands trembled as she opened the email. Her war with the neighborhood might be over, but it seemed the neighborhood's war with her was just beginning.